This phone was actually announced and released back in November last year, the Redmi 12 Pro series. And I've got with me the Redmi 12 Pro Plus, which is the high-end model here that I'm going to be covering in this video. So it's got the 200 megapixel main camera with optical image stabilization. It's got 120 watt super fast charging, a 6.67 inch 120 Hz AMOLED screen. It's all powered by the MediaTek 1080, 8 gigabytes RAM, 256 gigabyte of UFS 2.2 storage. Great to see that Xiaomi has not followed that trend of not including a charger or a cable. So we have here our Type-C to Type-A cable. The charger, so it's a very powerful 120 watts, fully charges the phone in approximately 20 minutes in my testing. And then we get this. So inside you'll find here our SIM tray tool. There is a little bit of paperwork, so a quick start guide, warranty card, safety information, and then a TPU case. Now, I like the look of this blue version right here. We've got glass on the back of it. They don't state if it's Gorilla Glass 5, but the front is covered with Gorilla Glass 5. So on the right here, our always on capacitive fingerprint reader, volume up and down button. So this is all plastic. The frame's all plastic. The volume up and down button is plastic. And the feel of it in hand doesn't feel too bad, but a little bit cheaper than some of the previous models from them. Down the bottom here, you'll find our Type-C port, so it's USB 2 speeds. We've got a SIM tray here that takes 2 nano SIMs, microphone, loudspeaker, another loudspeaker at the top, microphone there, IR transmitter, and yes, 3.5 millimeter out, and it sounds pretty good. So we are looking at approximately the thickness of this phone, about 9 millimeters. It's just under 9 millimeters measuring here, and it does weigh a slightly hefty 210 grams. So Gorilla Glass on the front there, glass on the back, all plastic. I do like the look of this blue though. I think it looks quite nice. And then of course our cameras on the rear. So unfortunately they're still keeping, like other brands, with the setup of having an 8 megapixel ultra wide and then a 2 megapixel macro. Ugh. It's kind of a camera that you'd use once and that is it. And then we have our 200 megapixel shooter there at the top, which is a Samsung sensor. And that is probably the star of the show. It does have optical image stabilization too. Bezels around the outside, they don't look bad, and the 16 megapixel camera is in that cutout. So it's a flat screen, so I'm all for this. I love flat AMOLED screens. Maximum brightness, it does peak at 900 in the high brightness mode nits, and you can see it out in direct sunlight. So right now it's going to overpower my current camera settings. It is a bright screen, vibrant, good colors. Touch seems to be very good, the touch response. Now you see that there is a rubber gasket around our SIM tray there, and the reason behind that is it does have an IP53 splash-proof rating to it, so that's good. They've tested it, and of course no micro SD, which is a bit of a shame. So each SIM, nano SIM goes on either side of that. Now 5G, I can pick up 5G here where I am based in Spain. You see we've got 5G straight away, and I do have pretty good signal strength. I have noticed that the 4G LTE band 20 also working well here in Spain, not a problem with that. MIUI 14 performance is in general pretty good. You can see I've got the apps drawer here, and I haven't really noticed too many animation stutters, but occasionally I've noticed that MediaTek Dimensity, the 1080, sometimes show a little bit of lag. Now it's got 8 gigabytes of RAM, and we've got plenty of storage on board here too, with it 256 gigabytes of UFS 2.2 storage. Now, even though this model is selling for just under 500 euros here in Europe, we still get a lot of this bloatware pre-installed crammed on, and there's quite a bit, a lot of games, other junk that you probably go through and uninstall. Now, it's not hard to do the uninstall of it. You can go in through system settings, apps, and then find the uninstaller, which is what I'm doing here, what I did before. I uninstalled over 3 gigabytes worth and some 20-something plus what I would classify as bloatware apps, so that is quite a bit. Now, we've got a Widevine level 1 cert here, which is good. So we've got Netflix in full HD, Amazon Prime Video 2 should be in full HD. It does pass the safety net test, which is good. And here you'll see that camera 2 API support. We've got that for the main camera on the rear, so you could play around with Gcam ports, open camera and others too if you wanted to get a different style of photo. Now the UFS 2.2 storage, as I just mentioned before, 256 gigabytes worth of it, good speeds. Random reads and writes are nice, so that is not going to bottleneck or slow down the system. It's more the chipset that's going to be doing that. So definite mid-range power here, getting just over 440,000 points with Antutu. Not bad at all. Now, I would have actually liked to have seen, even though people would say, yeah, it's getting old now, the Snapdragon 870. I think it still would have been fine in a device like this, being mid-range. Now, it doesn't throttle at all. Well, okay, 0.9%. That's it. 0.9% throttling in the 20-minute stress test. So the thermals on it are very good. Now, gaming with, say, Genshin Impact for an hour, I've noticed that it gets a little warm just around here, but nothing alarming. So I can comment on those thermals that they're excellent. It has liquid cooling in this too as well, according to Xiaomi. They've mentioned that. So charge time's incredibly quick. I went from 17% here to 122 minutes. Now, if I did charge it 5% battery, it would still be around 21, 22 minutes is what I can get. So really quick with that. HyperCharge 120 watts. Now, battery life, you are looking at, you can see here I got 8.5 hours on screen time because of the 5,000 milliamp hour battery. It does go for quite a decent amount. So this was just light kind of mixed use here. If you're someone that's very demanding gaming a lot, then of course this time will be quite a few hours less. I think most people should be able to get 8 to 9 and definitely a full day's use out of the Note 12 Pro Plus. Now I have with my settings forced everything to be in 120 Hertz globally here with the display. So you got the refresh rate override, so 60 or 120. Sadly, there is no 90. You got all your white balance options in here, dark mode, all of that, which is great. Now, dark mode's great for saving the battery too, since it's an AMOLED display. And I'll show you that 120 Hertz, most of the UI will be running at this, but going into YouTube, it doesn't seem to be. When I scroll here, this does not seem to be 120 Hertz, and I think that's just the app. So it's a variable refresh rate. Even though I have actually just forced it to 120 Hertz, it won't override and work with every single app out there. Now, audio quality, 3.5mm at the top of it, of course, is right here. Absolutely fantastic to have this. And this is one thing I comment on in all of my videos, that Xiaomi does a really good job of their 3.5mm audio out. I find it to be loud, clear, good stereo separation, and really I don't have any complaints with it. It's nice to get at this price point. I will say, being a little bit picky, I think the Qualcomm audio out via analog sounds a little bit better for some reason here than MediaTek. So that's one thing I've picked up on. Now, loudspeaker, one at the bottom, one at the top. I'm going to jump into one of my videos right here and give you a sample of them at 100% volume. They are okay speakers. There's a little hint of bass in there. The mids are okay, bit of treble. I just wish it was a bit louder. I have heard louder from them, and for some reason it seems to be just toned down a bit. Perhaps to stop those speakers from distorting, from clipping. Now, gaming on the Note 12 Pro Plus here is good, but I will comment on one thing, that if you get into some areas with some big baddies with Genshin Impact, for example, it will lag, and I notice that now and then it will start to lag a little bit. Now, the settings I'm using here are the high settings at 60 frames per second. Probably a little too demanding for the Dimensity 1080. You should lower it down a little, but it's just to test what it's going to be like. So don't expect your gaming performance to be flawless. There will be those little dips and lags, but overall, it's reasonably good, pleasant. And as I look around here, you can see that sometimes it drops a few frames. A little bit of lag here and there. Now, I know a lot of people have commented and said that, hey, in Genshin Impact, you're only at level 20, you're only Adventure at level 10. Well, I just simply don't have enough time to play this fantastic game more. Oh, there was a lot more lag here around where the trees are, you can see. And over to our cameras now with the Redmi Note 12 Pro Plus. So the front-facing camera, 16 megapixels, you can shoot 1080p 30 frames per second, and yes, there is a 1080p 60 frames per second. It does have electronic image stabilization, but I've noticed that it doesn't seem to be quite as good as the Qualcomm-powered Redmi phones. They tend to do the EIS, the electronic image stabilization, just a little better. You can notice there are some shakes to it. I have also noticed too a little bit of overexposing. You can probably see on my face here how it's coming out just a little too wide at times. So some optimization is needed here. Now, the audio bitrate is thankfully 256 kilobits per second, not 96 kilobits per second. So yay there for the bitrate. So this is what this phone is all about, the 200 megapixel camera, wow, and the 120 watt fast charging. So I'm recording in 4K 30 frames per second, and what I've noticed is, you're probably seeing it now, is that there is no electronic image stabilization, only the optical image stabilization here that comes with the sensor. So that's all we get. So that's why you can see it rocking around, shaking a little bit as I just walk along. So if I was to jog, which I am now, and see it gets a little shaky here. So I hope they can implement this. I believe the chipset does support it. It does support electronic image stabilization with 4K 30 frames per second. There is, however, no 4K 60. Now I'm just going to apply a little bit of digital zoom here. So I'm going to bring that up now to 2 times. You can see that it's still pretty good with this 200 megapixel sensor. Now I can't swap over to the ultra wide on the go, unfortunately, because the ultra wide camera only supports 1080p. This is now ultra wide video that does have electronic image stabilization, so all 1080p footage, and with the main camera electronic image stabilization at 1080p but not 4K. So this 1080p footage is a little bit of a letdown. It looks a little washed out, lacking details, and it's that 8 megapixel sensor that we've seen so many times. It's as common as, you remember the Snapdragon 620 days with Xiaomi, or I do. Well, it's just that same sensor, the 2 megapixel macro, the 8 megapixel ultra wide, over and over again. And I think at this price point, it really should have a much better ultra wide. They could have just given it an ultra wide with autofocus, bigger, better lens, better sensor than this 8 megapixel poor camera. This is the main camera, rear camera, 200 megapixels portrait shot. Looks okay, not bad, a lot of detail in there. Front facing camera, a little too white, sometimes it overexposed, but it didn't here. Now bright colors, this main camera has a lot of problems, and the other cameras too as well. Often clipping the colors, a little overexposed. So this is supposed to be bright yellow, but it looks more whitish. It just couldn't handle those bright colors. The main camera, however, in ideal conditions, can take some really decent looking shots, as you can see now from these examples. And this one of my cat Vera, of course. I've got to put one of her in almost all of my photo samples. And this is the ultra wide now, which is not so great. A lot of noise and grain to it in these kind of conditions. It's not a very good sensor, that 8 megapixel sensor. Low light here with the main camera, sunset, and then these samples. This is night mode off. And later now with the night mode on, you can see it does brighten things up, but there is a lot of noise. So clearly a lot of optimization needed with the cameras. Now the price of the Redmi Note 12 Pro Plus here is about 480 euros. That's quite an ask considering the chipset that it does have, the current state of the cameras, the optimization. Clearly a lot is needed there. We don't have electronic image stabilization with the 4K footage. At least the audio bitrate is 256 kilobits per second. A weak ultra-wide camera, macro camera that you probably only use once and never use again. The selfie camera is a little weak there too as well. Now the battery life is around about 9 hours, 8 or 9 hours on screen time. It's very good and it charges super fast. It has a really nice flat AMOLED screen. And the build for a plastic frame phone isn't bad. Glass on the back, Gorilla Glass 5 on the front of it. It's got a lot of good things going for it, like the 3.5mm headphone jack too, and a splash rating to it too, IP53. The trouble is, at that price point, we've got other phones that you should consider, like the Samsung A54. Now, the A54, I believe, also doesn't have electronic image stabilization with its 4K camera, but you gain a better ultra-wide camera, better selfie camera, and it's debatable, but I do believe a better UI to experience. One UI I think is just a bit better than MIUI 14, quite a bit better actually. And this phone at times does have a few little lags that creep in that you do see. Now, performance-wise gaming, as I showed you, can play the latest titles, occasionally a few little lags there. Now, they do have that cheaper version, which is the Redmi Note 12 Pro. Now, that's priced about 90 or 80 or so euros cheaper, and it's probably the model to go for. You get a 50 megapixel camera with also optical image stabilization, and then the other downgrade is it's 66 watt charging instead of 120 watt charging, but honestly it's not much of a difference. You're talking about an additional 20-25 minutes of charge time versus this. You're saving that extra money, and the Redmi Note 12 Pro is slightly thinner and slightly lighter too, which is another bonus you get. So to answer my question, should you buy the Redmi Note 12 Pro Plus here? Well, I would say if the price comes down and something that I think is more acceptable for this type of mid-range phone, yes. However, consider the other phones out there at this price point, around close to 500 euros, what you can get. Take a good look around and look at all your options out there. So thank you so much for watching my review here of the Redmi Note 12 Pro Plus.